Hi, this is Sally Morgan and Tristan Corgi. I am a physical therapist, a Tellington T-Touch practitioner, and a craniosacral therapist for animals and people. And Tristan is a Corgi, and this is episode 79 of Conversations with a Corgi. And boy, I got in at about midnight, 12:30 last night. Antique cars. Actually, that's sort of a vintage muscle car. Anyway, so I am peaked this morning. That's why we're starting a little late. And Tristan hasn't got his own chair today, so you might see more of him. I wanted to sit on the front deck so you can see the lupins back here. They are the most beautiful colors of purple right now. And today I really wanted to spend some time to honor a client of mine who crossed the Rainbow Bridge recently. I think I saw him maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe even a whole month ago. And he was a little Yorkie Chihuahua mix, and he was very charismatic and charming and just a wonderful little being for his mother. She had been living in Florida and recently moved back to her home where her family was in Rhode Island with him. And he was quite healthy and doing well, she thought. And then suddenly he exhibited tremendous numbers of symptoms. He was having autoimmune problems, and Yorkies are prone to many genetic disorders. And she did not really understand why all this was happening. He had a positive test for a tick-borne illness in the last 6 months, treated him for that, and she was very upset about how things were fine in Florida, but they weren't here. But after seeing me, I think she understood that there was a whole bunch of things contributing to the storm that the little guy was weathering at this point. So what happened was, being a Yorkie mix, he was a little bit orange, and he was, as you know, in Chinese medicine, if you listen to my sister, what we call a hot dog versus a cold dog. Tristan's also a hot dog. He has an excess of heat in his system. He tends to flop down with his whole belly on the cool stones in my kitchen. And he is a dog always looking to be cool. It's one reason he loves to go swimming in the ocean when we're at the beach, because he is hot. And so part of what happens when you have a dog that is energetically and systemically hot, you want to feed him cold food to keep him in balance. And that doesn't mean temperature-wise cold, it means cold energetically food. So, so much dog food is made with chicken, and I have to say, nearly every dog I see, now of course I'm only seeing sick dogs, come to me because they are sick, and they are mostly hot dogs who have been eating chicken. Chicken's a hot food. You cannot give a dog like Tristan or this little Yorkie chicken. And then the top, the icing on the cake is to give them dry food that is chicken. So this little fellow, his mother was kind of caring for him the way a lot of people care for cats, which is not to say this is the way you should care for cats either. He was eating free choice dry kibble all day long with a little bit of wet food mixed in the PM and the AM. And what happened to him was the chicken, he was such a hot dog, and having lived in Florida, and then he moved up here, the chicken was feeding that fire, and he was so dehydrated from eating dry food. And he's a little tyke, and it takes a lot of water. Like literally your dog cannot eat enough water in a day to offset the effects of any dry food. The best on the market, you cannot drink enough water to offset the dehydrating effects on your dog. So this poor little guy was in a crisis of hot being fed by hot, which led to his autoimmune dysfunction, which led to him having kidney and liver and other organ failure setting onto his body. So he had been taken by his mom to Tufts, the big veterinary school here in Eastern Mass, and he was getting chemotherapy treatments, which are really hard on any person or dog. And that had helped him a little bit, but they were so rough on him. He was just in this decline because he was in this crisis, because she was still continuing to feed him and care for him in the same way, which wasn't addressing the underlying problem. And she's not the only one. I have had 5 clients in the last month same exact situation, a hot dog being fed hot food, and now at whatever point or stage in their life they're at, they are in a crisis of health because of the symptoms from being fed the wrong food. And, it just over time, it builds up until you just cannot, your body cannot function. Thank God Tristan, he eats turkey now, which is considered a neutral food. If I can get it, I give him duck, which is a cold food, and he loves duck. I mean, he craves it. So I know that this wisdom of China over centuries, thousands of years, is not untrue, because I see the difference in Tristan with even one serving of duck. Sometimes I get him the Stella and Chewy's raw frozen duck. I'm a vegetarian. I can't just be whacking up a duck in the kitchen. But, just one serving of duck, he is so much more vibrant. And he gets some cold fish sometimes when we're at the beach because fish is readily available. Oh, and here comes a butterfly. So anyway, when I met this little fellow, his mother took the long drive over 2 hours with him from Rhode Island to see me. And I did some energetic work with him. One of the things I did first, because he looked very exhausted and dehydrated from the ride, we gave him some water, and apparently he had been diagnosed with Cushing's and diabetes. This guy was only 6 or 7 years old. That is a lot. He just had so many symptoms going on from basically the same thing, this hot feeding hot idea. But he was so sick, and he loved his owner. He was really just staying here to be with her, like so many dogs do for us. So the first thing I did was run the pendulum down his chakras, and it was hardly moving. He had such a low energy. Now, often this happens when an animal is getting ready to cross the rainbow bridge, but I've also seen it happen quite a lot when an animal's been getting chemotherapy, and he had had either 2 or 3 treatments by then, because the chemotherapy really overwhelms your whole body in an effort to kill the dysfunctioning cells, basically, but you're really poisoning yourself when you have to take chemotherapy. And with animals, I don't know, there's a lot of thought about how effective it is and when you should do it. And he was a young dog, so why not try it to help him? And I wish this woman had found me sooner. So I was a little concerned because the only area where the pendulum was moving was his crown chakra, which is, again, frequently seen when an animal is passing. But he was young and he had a lot of light in his eyes, so I thought, that was just because of the chemo and that we would go ahead and do our session and see what happened. And he just had tremendous heat over his kidneys and his liver and really all of his organ systems. And I did, a whole session of craniosacral therapy with him. I taught his owner how to do T-touch work on his ears in particular to try to help him and keep him out of pain because he was just feeling terrible. So she was doing work on the tips of his ears and around the base of his ears, and she liked to carry him. He was a little guy in a little purse thing, and I made sure she hadn't been carrying him upright because a lot of people with little dogs do carry them in front of them in those baby carrier things. They are so bad for your dog's back, so bad. But luckily, this little fellow had never been carried that way, and she knew better than to do that. And he was very uncomfortable when she flipped him in that direction just to understand what I was saying she shouldn't do with him. And he had a lot of problems in his back, of course. I did some adjustments there. And finally, at the end of the session, I did the pendulum over his body again. She also took a flower essence with her called Christ Ease, which is a really good one when an animal is in extreme crisis. You would use it in the way that a lot of people think they should use Rescue Remedy. But, he had been getting chemotherapy. She felt on the, making choices about living and dying. And when you have that kind of a thing going on, Christ Ease is what you want. And it's ironic because it turned out that the owner needed it as well. So it worked out really well. So I did that, gave her the flower essence. We even gave him some while he was here. and told her she should contact my sister for more discussion about food. But I lived near a food store. She went right down and bought him Stella and Chewy's rabbit, I think, or duck. I don't know if they always have rabbit at that store, but he liked it, and she immediately started feeding it to him. He was also so incredibly dehydrated, he could barely drink. Like, he needed fluids, and she had been taking him in to get IV fluids. So the poor little guy, at the end of the session, I did the pendulum over his chakras, and they were all spinning. His root chakra was not that vibrant, but the rest of him was doing well. And when I went back over his hindquarters a little bit and worked back there, the root chakra was picking up, and he was doing a lot better. And I was really relieved to see that he had that much life force still in him. So the other interesting thing about this dog, I mean, he was very connected with her. She had had some relationship situations, and he was really her whole world, as so many of our dogs are for us. And she had met maybe a month before she met me, a guy, a friend guy. And he is really interested in alternative medicine. He has Crohn's disease and fibromyalgia and some other things. He's also a young man, maybe 40 at the most, 30 to 40. And he should not have these kinds of problems at his age. So again, I was thinking, wow, is he a hot or a cold person, and what has he been eating? So we talked about that a little bit. But in fact, this magazine that we have around here that is not widely circulated outside of my area, they had been running an article in the last issue about the work I do. And I've had such interesting synchronicities with people finding me from that article. Even though I've run an ad in that magazine since like 1997, steadily, a third of a page ad, full color. People don't see that, but they saw this beautiful article. And thank you, Fran, for writing it. So this fellow had found the article and saw what I was doing, and he had received some craniosacral therapy treatments from someone in Maine. He lives in New Hampshire. And he knew that that was very, very helpful to him, and knew that's what the dog needed. So this guy drove from New Hampshire, another 2-hour drive, to meet me and the woman with her dog at my house for this session. And then they went out to the Berkshires for a weekend of relaxation at one of our wonderful spa-type resorts where they have wonderful organic food, and, it's a really great retreat place. So they were there, and at that point the woman met a person who is like very spiritual and a psychic. And the psychic told her that she felt that the dog was sent to her to protect her after her grandmother had passed away, and that he would be with her grandmother when he crossed the Rainbow Bridge. And this really struck a note with her. She knew that was true. And so many times with our dogs, there are things like this, these very spiritual, deep messages that we question, and we know it's true. Like my client who had a big 150-pound Pyrenees pass away, and he came back to her as this little bird that she saw by her window, and it was a kind of bird that usually flies south in the winter, and the little guy stayed around all winter at her bird feeder, and she just knew it was her dog. And we all have experiences like that, but not all of us want to see them for the spiritual messages that they have. So this woman is very spiritual, so she was very touched by this psychic telling her that the dog was related to her relationship with her grandmother, was here to protect her, and that when he was gone, he would be with her grandmother. And this friend of hers was such a generous person. He paid for the weekend, he took really good care of her, and they had a nice retreat. Well, I hadn't heard from her, so I contacted her recently. And it turns out the little dog he didn't make it. He just continued to go downhill. And this happens often with a craniosacral therapy session when someone's really in a crisis, a human or animal. They often revive for 3 or 4 days, almost to remind the person with them of how they were, to give them a sense of, yes, those years with you were great, and then they gradually decline. And that's exactly what happened with him. He was able to rally for a few days, eat some of the new food, eat some of the crises flower essence, and he did a little better. And then his organs continued to shut down with kidney failure and liver failure and just overall failure. And so she lost him. And she knew immediately that he was with her grandmother. And that was a huge relief to her to know they were together. And it was not lost on her that now she has two guardian angels in heaven to look after her, her little dog and her grandmother. And the other interesting thing is that this little dog died on this new friend's birthday. And it was almost as if to say from the grandmother and the dog that you are with your new friend. I know he will take care of you and watch over you. You will be with him for a long time. He will help you throughout your life. And our jobs are done. And we can go to heaven and be angels and help you from there. We no longer have to be in your physical form. And so, of course, when we know that, and it's true, we are so sad that we don't have our dogs. And that's why we love the miracle of the cuddle clone. Thank you, Gwen Campbell, my niece, for finding them. I mean, it made such a difference for my sister to be able to hug her stuffed Myra. And this woman was so happy to find that she could send in her wonderful pictures of her little dog and get a cuddle clone so that he can be with her. And like so many of us, I mean, she keeps some of his hair and his toys with her to remember him. I mean, he was a very charismatic little guy. He had quite the dynamic name, too. So, losing your dog is just such a personal crisis. It's so difficult. And really, one of the things that Bernie Siegel always says, and I totally agree with him, and I'm sure Linda Tellington would say the same thing, is that we get spiritual lessons from our lives with our dogs, and we learn a lot about living and dying from them to make sense of things like a little 6-year-old dog passing away. So in a drawn out process, like why does that happen? What is the meaning behind that? And so this woman is really doing some soul searching to understand what happened with her dog and her relationship with him and with her grandmother, and to find this new friend who really is like a guardian angel on earth for her. They are wonderful people, and I am sure they will come back and see me for sessions for humans at some point. And this is a big spiritual event for them, as it is for many of us. I mean, I have been changed immeasurably by the passing of all of my animals, rabbits, dogs, horses, all of them, and kitties. And so she has decided with her friend to go to Peru and do some spiritual journeying and work there to further integrate all of the greater meanings of life and death and to understand how that fits into her life. She's a young woman. She has a lot of things ahead of her, and so she has a lot to offer the world, and she really would like to be able to help other people with their animals so that she can help other animals be safe and healthy, and so that she can help other people deal with the loss of their animals. And I have been in the works for a while thinking that I have another book I'm working on about animals in one session and how that helped them. And it's about half done, but my next project is to write a book about animals passing away. I really feel like this is something that all of us struggle with, and I feel like I need to have a book for people to look at when they lose an animal or when their animal is old so that they can understand the process and know that there's a lot going on when their animal passes. There are many, many choices that you have to make and many, many deeper lessons that you can find when your animal is passing away. So I have a lot of little stories and anecdotes from people and Corgi people I've connected with to put this book together, and I think I need to start working on that now instead of waiting until this other book is done. And this story will certainly be one of them. So the other interesting thing about this little dog is that many other corgis have passed away over the Rainbow Bridge in the last week. And one woman was so sad. She said, "Close the gates to the Rainbow Bridge. I can't take it anymore because every day there's 5 pictures of dogs." And in fact, a great corgi lover in Germany that we're all friends with lost her husband to cancer just a few days ago. And it's so devastating. I mean, he shared her world with her, and she's a wonderful artist and a great corgi lover and a generous, sweet person. She did the most beautiful picture of Comet, which is at the top of my non-professional Sally Morgan Facebook page. It's just this beautiful watercolor of Comet. So many animals have crossed the Rainbow Bridge lately, and this woman with the little Yorkie mix, she has felt that he has been with her. She has felt his presence. She has noticed things in the house being in a different place than she put them, and she lives alone. And so she knows he is still with her. And this is so true for so many of us. Comet was barking to me and Tristan for days and days and days after he passed. And every night at the same time, which happened to be the time that he passed away, we would hear a bark, and Tristan would jump off the sofa and run over to where Comet had been resting and look for him. So I know I wasn't hallucinating, unless my dog was too. But, you know, they do stay around to comfort us. They're very concerned about leaving us here. And they only seem to pass away when they know that we will be safe and that we will be protected, and that they often come back to help us find a new puppy, or to help us rescue another dog, or find another animal in our lives, because our lives are very long and theirs are short. And so it's often a wonderful thing when they bring us another animal into our lives. And many people report that the dog they have now seems so much like one they had 15, 20, 30 years ago, that they are sure the dog is the reincarnation of that original one, or some aspect of his spirit is in the new dog. So these are some of the things that I'll be looking at in this upcoming book. Well, upcoming, it's a couple of years out, depending on how much time I have to work on it and how many people I can find to give me information for this book. But I have so many stories working in dog and horse hospice care of my own. And some of them are in my book that's out now. So let this be a lesson and an inspiration for all of us to care for our animals as best we can when they are here, and to be always open to finding answers to things that just traditional medicine is not helping us enough. And I personally, when I had cancer, I was not willing to give up traditional medicine, but I sure wasn't willing to give up alternative medicine. So the combination is what helped me. And I am sure our animals are no different. I would certainly do everything I would do for myself for them. And a combination of alternative and traditional medicine is often the best thing. So try to feed your dogs as well as you can. There's a commercial I've seen on TV lately where dogs are living 20 and 22 years on some kind of food that doesn't look very great, but you know, the possibility exists that our animals can be with us longer, and people are living longer, and part of that's nutrition and wellness and exercise. And what we know about people, we know about our dogs, and we just need to keep searching for answers. So if you have a dog or a cat and you're listening to this, please go to my sister's website, www.drjudymorgan.com. That's drjudymorgan.com. I think many of you already are aware of her. But we can't afford to not feed them the best we can, to keep them with us as long as possible. I mean, all my dogs have lived to be almost 16, but I occasionally hear of a Corgi who's 17, and Tristan's really tiny, and he's had excellent care and food his whole life. So he might actually be the longest Corgi I'll ever have, hopefully. And he's DM clear, so he has really not too many things against him except the tick population, which is why we're on the deck. So I encourage you to treasure every minute you have with your pets while they're with us, and to treasure their presence in your life when they are no longer with us. They have so many lessons for us, and do not think you are crazy or silly or imagining things, because they do come back to see us, and not always in the same form or in the same way. I know for Comet, he had a connection with whales. I've had many experiences with whales that I know his presence is there. And of course my client with the Pyrenees and the little bird. So be open to things in your life that will let you know that your animal is still with you. And sometimes even the animals you have, like my sister has lost so many dogs, and she has so many dogs with her, but every once in a while one of them might do something that reminds her of one of the old dogs, which is out of the ordinary for the dog that's here. So be open to the messages they have for us, because they do have so many messages. And the synchronicities of when they come and go into our lives are very important. So treasure your dog today. I'm treasuring Tristan every day. And I made a new formula of tick repellent, which was geranium and cedar and peppermint and lavender and witch hazel in a squirt bottle, which really didn't work very well. I have to put a new squirter on it. But it smelled really good, and he has no ticks on him, so I guess it's working. But I certainly don't trust any one tick repellent at this point because they are so many out there. So enjoy your pets today and think about the pets that you have lost and the messages they have for you in your life now. Thanks for joining us today for another episode of Conversations with a Corgi. And I will be at my work as an educator tomorrow, so we will be back with our next issue of Conversations with a Corgi on Tuesday. And I think we're going to start looking at flower essences. Have a great day, everyone, and treasure every minute with your pets.